order at 6:02. And could we have a roll call, please, Mrs. Martin?
Catherine Patino,
Here.
David Florio.
Here.
Donna Colunian.
Here.
James Pearson.
Here.
Craig Levis.
Here.
Don Cowart.
Here.
Harold Sands.
Thank you. Could we have a motion to recess into executive session, please?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to recess into executive session.
I second the motion.
And I assume it's 6:02 still. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino.
Yes.
David Florio.
Yes.
Donna Colunian.
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Okay. We shall return after executive session. It's going to be very brief, so we should be back here by 6, what's it, 6:10? Yeah, so we'll be back. Thank you.
No, I think it's the same one.
Huh.
Maybe it isn't. Is that in the block?
Again, I'd like to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee, and I have 6:11. We're a minute delayed. All right, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could just remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. Thank you. Mr. Levis, if you could notify the public of the emergency exits, please.
In case of emergency, there are 2 exits to your rear. Go through those doors and you can exit the building to your left or your right.
Thank you. And Mrs. Colonian, if you could honor us by reading the mission statement of Coventry Public Schools, please.
Sure. The mission of Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, and challenge all students in an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individuals, and global citizens.
Thank you. And just to report out to the public, the school committee met in executive session after we opened at 6 o'clock, and we considered, we had 2 votes, both of which were unanimous, carried 4-0. One was to approve the executive session minutes of 2/17/21. No, 22, 21, yeah. 22. I am right. I'm like, am I crazy? All right. Votes were to, and we also approved the homeschooling request. So that being said, is there a motion to
Madam Chair,
close, seal the record, sorry.
Madam Chair, make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42-46-4 and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
Thank you. And could we have a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Martin?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
David Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian.
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to number 5, approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of 2/17/22?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 17, 2022 as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to agenda item number 6, the FY23 budget update, discussion and vote. Mr. Levis, did you
So
wanna-
sure, we put the budget summary on the screen there. It's the first page. I think to highlight, last time we were requesting 3.95%, and we're at 3.76. I know the agenda says discussion and vote, but we're going to be meeting next week. We have a lot more changes we're going to be looking at. And so I think at our next meeting, if the changes are significant, we'll bring that back to the committee. What we submitted to the town was the 3.95 increase. And Mr. Murphy, can you put on the, I just handed out, it's my apology, Mr. Sands had put together a presentation, and I forgot to send it to Miss Martin to get uploaded. So tonight I just printed out a couple of sheets. We'll upload it, and so you can have it virtually in your packet. But This just highlights where the changes are that got us from 3.95 to 3.76. And obviously, Mr. Sands is here to answer any questions, but you can see we were able to decrease some of the supplies and materials in the area curriculum based on using of ESSER funds. And I know we approved a lot more ESSER funds, but that's also this is what was in the budget. So you can see the need and how that's going to help us moving forward in terms of high quality curriculum. We're able to decrease in equipment, technology, hardware by $20,000 for a total budget decrease of $129,494. And then there was an increase in purchase services in special education of $43,434, and an increase in fees of $25. So for a total of $43,459 increase. Because our conversations are ongoing. Our budgeting is daily. We're going to be meeting again with all the principals to look at staffing. Remember, we had said that we didn't include staffing requests, so we're still going through that. We're also monitoring class size and course selection at the high school. We have a meeting next Tuesday to look at that. So we'll be coming back to you with all the real looking, in the staffing and as enrollment numbers also looking at, are there reductions or do we need additions? But I think our commitment is we're going to work within that 3.95 and hopefully we can get that budget down even further. I believe we've done most of the work looking at our non-personnel, but we know that's where personnel is. And there's other areas like the vans, and we're going to talk a little bit more about later on about fund balance, but you approved us using ESSER funds or in an American Recovery Plan funds for purchasing vans, which we know will significantly offset our transportation line, but we need the cash to do that because these are reimbursement. And so, when we receive cash from the town, hopefully we'll be able to do that and we'll be able to incorporate that into the budget piece. So there's other areas where we feel that we can definitely make some reductions. But so if there's questions for myself or Mr. Sands, again, even though we had to submit our budget that was approved by the school committee, we know that we'll be working every week to hopefully reduce the budget, and we'll make sure that we're very transparent about that.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. So I guess we'll just go down the row. Mr. Florio, have any questions?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Clunian?
No questions.
Nothing. Mr. Pearson?
Clear, no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions either. So thank you for your continued work on getting this budget in order and looking for ways to save and put us on the right footing. So thank goodness for ESSER funding and the ability to spend some of that on curriculum, because that's really going to save us some. Plus, we're ahead of the game. We'll be able to do it a lot quicker than we've been able to.
And I
do
think
in the
that ties
past.
into our next presentation too, because you're going to see how that, some of the projections in terms of how the curriculum is going to help us really impact student performance. So,
Exactly.
and-
All right, so we don't have to vote on this, so we can just, are there any questions from the public gathered on the budget? Seeing none, I think we can move on to the agenda item number 7, which is the student performance data update presentation on math and English language arts. So.
So we have, I just want to thank Erin Coyne and Dr. Fred Schockhart for coming, and they've done a lot of work in analyzing our student performance data. I think what's important is, since the pandemic, we've talked a lot about learning loss, right? And it's been critical, and people have been very critical of schools and distance learning. And, we learned a lot through that process. And we all, I think, consensus that we need to have students in front of teachers to make a real difference in most cases, right? But we also realize that there's certain strategies, interventions that we can put in place that are going to make a difference. And Rhode Island's done some work around this, what they call LEAP report. A lot of stakeholders looked at ways to address learning loss. We did some work. And so I think there's a lot of promises, and we were very pleasantly, I don't want to say I was pleasantly surprised. I think maybe many people expected this, but so we had a conversation when the data came out. Erin had shared it with our administrators, and we asked her, can you guys put a presentation together? Because I think it's important, obviously for the committee, but for the public. So having said that, I appreciate you guys doing this, and thank you.
Good evening.
Really nice is that I represent special great education, collaboration. So it's we prepared a very brief presentation, couple of slides, the new one on COVID. Also these slides that we will review the data and then the final these slides is going to be explanation of initiatives that have contributed to the results that we are discerning in our data, and also follow up next steps where we obviously want to implement. So what Erin did is she really looked. The first data point was winter 2020, so just before March when COVID hit. Then a year later, in the middle of COVID, was our second data point, and then our most recent data point, when we at January, all our students were benchmarked. And so at the elementary level, what we've seen is when we compare our most recent data at the beginning of this school year. At the beginning of the school year, we're quite honestly disappointed with the results. But what was really encouraging is that we've seen a huge upswing in data and proficiency data between fall, the start of this school year, and where we are now at the elementary level. In addition, we've also seen that the group of students who are the furthest behind, again, between fall and winter, has reduced significantly. So the combination of those two is very powerful and indicates a very positive trend that we'd like to see. So as the graph shows, and the top one, the blue one is for I believe math, and then the magenta one is that we're more or less back at the performance pre-COVID. At math, students who are not at risk, which we call students on watch and at benchmark, that group of students goes 85% of our elementary students, and math students who are not at risk equals 9%. So again, that's a lot of positive information, very positive trends that we're discerning at the elementary level. Particularly, and that's not captured in our slide, but I still want to emphasize it, between the start of this school year and January. It's a slightly different picture for the secondary schools, where we haven't seen that upswing yet. Students not at risk for reading is 73%, and in math it's 79%. And when we look at the three data points, we see a bit of a decline, but I would caution you when you look at take also a peek at the y-axis, because it starts at 65. It's not all of a sudden that our students have gone down from 50% to 20%. That's not the case. It is from 86 to 79 for math and 79 to 73. Now, what we need to keep in mind, and Aaron is going to go a little bit deeper into that, is we are closely monitoring these data because we are wondering if, because secondary had more of a staggered return to in-person learning, whether we're going to see an uptick in the next data period. Because if you probably remember, most of our students in elementary, they came back in September 2020 for 4 days a week. And then the secondary level, it was more staggered. So we are cautiously optimistic that we're going to see the same upswing, but that's like one of the next steps that we really want to keep on monitoring close. Mr. Murphy, is this a slow connection that you warned us about?
The magic
Clearly
touch.
the magic touch.
The magic.
That's why it's training you.
Exactly. I don't know if you should go sit down yet. Good exercise, I guess.
So this presentation is truly a bird's eye view, but we still want to give you a glimpse into the kind of robust data tracking kind of system that's behind the presentation. And again, a big thank you to Aaron for developing those systems. So what we're going to share 3 documents with you. One is where we monitor how we track the achievements on STAR for all of our students. There's also a separate tab. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but an example of subgroups of students. Again, we want to make sure that we track all our students and make sure that our English language learners, our students with IEPs, our students on free and reduced lunch, that they don't get lost in the mix, and also look at them as separate groups. So that's why we included IEP students, just to give you an idea of that we also look at that deeper level. And then we go into also briefly go into white paper. So Aaron, would you mind maybe going into the all students?
Yes, I'm just so just to give you a glimpse, as Fred mentioned, we do extensive analysis of all of our students' performance data so that we can tell, what's going on at any given time, look at trends and patterns and try to get right to the focus of the area that is in need. So that's what we do. And this is a view. We don't have to put it in. This is just a view. There are several tabs on the bottom. So this is just a view of the data just from the STAR assessment, because it is nationally normed, and that it's our benchmark measure for our universal screener from K to 11 students. All students take this in reading. So it's a good way for us to keep an eye on trends and patterns. This is a glimpse of what it looks like. Oh, here we go. Not working. To these.
I think you're touching inside.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, these are the graphs that Fred showed you a minute ago on the other slide. This is where they came from. This is the elementary percent of students who are not at risk, and the percent of secondary students who are not at risk, that 3-year view. And just for some context, we like to see around 80% of students, this is like a national RTI model, we want to see about 80% of students who are not at risk, who are being served by the core curriculum. That's the benchmark measure, 80% of students being served by the core curriculum. So obviously we'd like that number to be higher. We'd like kids to be also not at risk, but also not on watch. So we always strive to include those kids in the, that little danger zone. So we try to capture them. But all in all, like Fred was mentioning, we have bounced back almost to pre-COVID in elementary. And I we have some theories about why that is, which we'll get into a little bit. And then the secondary. And then just so you see the rest of the data that we haven't showed you, we also collect just by high school and just by middle school. So again, winter 2020, winter 2021, winter 2022, just to capture from right before the pandemic affected school department to now what's going on. The only other tab that shows this kind of longitudinal data is a little overwhelming to look at with all the colors, but if you're interested in learning more about how we track the data, this was actually Don's idea to create this, and he keeps it on his whiteboard, and it ended up getting so big that I just said, let's just put it in a spreadsheet because as years go by, so it's 2017, 2018, 19. So we look at trends over a long period of time, and we track things that are big things that are happening in the district, so that we can try to attribute some of the patterns that we're seeing to certain big initiatives that are happening. So just to give you like a glimpse into the kind of recording on the data that we do, it is very, very critical and important.
It's actually really powerful to not only look at the performance of our current individual grades, but also do cohort analysis, where we track the same groups of students from year to year.
Yellow.
Going down, we
These
also
are the
keep
same kids going down yellow.
same colors, the same group of
It
kids
follows.
over the years with them on the side, and major initiatives that were implemented that year. Again, it's education, so we can't always isolate individual variables, but we try to do at least our best to keep track of the biggest ones, like new curriculum, new requirements, and so on.
And in addition to this, I have other documents that will look at things for different cohorts of students, students who receive lunch, race, ethnicity, gender, all kinds of things. We try to look at it in many different ways so that any patterns that are happening become
obviously we do similar data for our subgroups. Again, we use the same color codes, the same spreadsheet behind it. And then the final document that I want to share with you is, obviously we don't look at our data in isolation. We also look at other research that's being done. So Renaissance Learning, which is a vendor of the STAR system, has also done the national studies of pre-COVID and post-COVID. The link is included. I think my biggest takeaway and here is that actually there is this whole conversation out there that COVID has created such a significant learning loss nationwide. We didn't really see it in our data, and what's interesting is that actually STAR also didn't really see it in their data. There has been a bit of a dip, more pronounced in math than in reading. So it's going to be interesting to keep on monitoring that. They do a national analysis after each benchmark. So
I just want to mention that there are other companies. So we use STAR, but another company is iReady that I got to listen to from them and talking about their data yesterday with STAR and they're finding the same thing. So we're looking at all the linking studies from the different nationally normed platforms to make sure that we're seeing the right, we're picking out the right things that we're trying to do, and we really are. So copy of this. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is, as you saw, our elementary students really seem to be rebounding significantly. And Fred and I were discussing that we expect to see the same sort of upward trend for secondary students as well. A couple of factors that have helped the elementary students so much are the new legislation about curriculum has really boosted us to start implementing these new high-quality curriculum, and we've really started in elementary the most, and they're largely in place now, thanks to Amy. I know that she has shared with you her curriculum presentation about everything that's going on there and all the different layers of implementation, and we feel like that's having a huge impact on performance. And also, the elementary students came back to full in-person learning on a much larger scale, much sooner than secondary students. So we feel like they have that leg up, and so they're really rebounding, and I think the secondary students will probably see similar in next year's data. Any questions so far? Like you said, the return to in-person learning started in September 2020 was staggered, and it was more elementary coming sooner, like 4 days a week, and special ed students. So they are starting to reap the benefits of that quicker. And the introduction of the high quality learning and math curriculum is being implemented now at the high school. We're getting to the bigger stages there where the heavy lifting is starting to happen. So we do fully expect that we'll see some benefits of that in next year's data. The summer 2021 ramp-up programs also we feel had a really positive impact on student learning over the summer. We were able to afford to hire additional interventionist staff, and we're also looking at ways to maximize the potential of how many students they can reach and increase our efficiency in that way. Our staff and our administration have been just outstanding. I've heard so many stories about, just administration, anything they can do above and beyond to help reach every student, students that were at home, families that were struggling with distance learning. It's been a real community effort. We also have a new professional development infrastructure that has been hugely successful. In fact, the meeting I was just at before this at the high school at 4 o'clock, we had a PLU session, and I got some great feedback from teachers that this process has been made so much easier for us. We really appreciate it. We're able to keep our professional development organized, and we have more opportunities, more diverse opportunities, more frequent opportunities to enhance our professional learning. So I think that's really helping us too. And just our focus on the whole student. We're always thinking about family support, trauma support, social economic, or social emotional, just the whole student, not just thinking only about the academic part and the scores. We care about the rest of it.
Erin, can I just add one other thing? The other one that I think is a contributing factor that shows how elementary kind of maybe outperforms secondary a little bit is our MTSS process and how it's been built. So the multi-tiered system of support started at the elementary level, and the model at elementary is easier to implement because the kids are on a schedule where they're with one teacher all day and they're in one school for 6 years. And so the principal, the team, they can monitor those kids very closely. And so the intervention process works really, really well at the elementary level. But then they move to the middle school, different schedule, different model, different staffing. And so MTSS looks a little bit different. And then they move to the high school where there's again another schedule and another model. And high schools in general have not had tons of success with MTSS because of how rigid the schedule is sometimes. So one of the things Amy's taken on, and I'm trying to support her, I know Erin and Fred and Brad, we're all involved in this concept of building MTSS out. So it's a pre-K to 12 initiative. And one of the things you approved for us to be able to look into purchasing was a robust MTSS tracking model that goes from elementary to middle to high. I'm sorry, I'm stealing your thunder. I apologize. I have a tendency of doing that. But anyways, I think that's a contributing factor as well for our elementary kids. We've been able to get supports in place, I think, quicker and easier than with the high school and middle school.
So our next step, in light of all of this data curriculum, K-12, ELA and math, legislation, we're seeing that it's having a huge positive impact. And then afterwards, a lot of work ahead of us, but it's so I feel like we're gonna be on top of the world moving forward. Implementation of our MTSS/data warehouse platform. So some of the work that I do manually will be housed in this platform and more with it and can become more transparent. And so we hope to start increasing that data knowledge and data use throughout the whole school district community, and follow kids more closely and more consistently between levels and between buildings. So that actually multiplying the track and have a consistent system of assessment, progress monitoring, intervention types, intervention access, all of that. And then assess our need for any ongoing additional supports, maybe continuing with the summer ramp up, for example, keep reviewing our intervention capacity. And then the implementation of the other key pieces of legislation, the Right to Read Act, for dyslexia, structural literacy, awareness, and proficiency, which knows all of our educators will have at some level of requirement there. We'll have a huge, and segments more about that too.
That's kind of what we have prepared, but we are very happy to answer any questions here tonight.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Really exciting stuff. Mr. Florio, did you have any questions for our presenters?
Very well done, professional, and high quality, which is something I've always expected from Fred and from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mrs. Colonian, anything?
Thank you very much. Very, very good data. I like data. I enjoy looking at it and seeing the different trends and everything. Now, how are our special education population? How are they doing? Have they,
in broad strokes, we actually have seen even a more significant positive upswing, especially in math. And Aaron and I have had conversations about that. We also currently at elementary have two math programs. We have our old math program, Go Math, and we also have a new one that's piloted, which is Adjournment. So we also are keeping track of the performance of not just students with IEPs, but all students, comparing. It's one of the unique situations that we actually have like a control.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But again, it all starts with high quality core curriculum, because every student benefits from robust interaction with robust grade level materials. And then special education, we provide additional levels of support to facilitate that access. And then, so that was math. And then for reading, we're also seeing a positive trend. And again, that could be attributed not only to the high quality reading programs, but also the more and more of our special educators are becoming receive additional training in structural literacy to address the needs of students with dyslexia.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Now, Mr. Pearson, anything?
Got me excited when you mentioned data warehouse. I don't know if it's a good excited, but no, it's a good thing. I work with data a lot at work. So no, this is excellent. I'm glad not only are we identifying, what's in place, but this next step slide is probably for me the most important thing of what are we going to do, as you said, to continue the momentum to improve. So seeing some sliding there, we don't want to have momentum in the sliding scores. So I thank you for both of you, and thank you to your respective teams for putting this together and showing this. And I think we should probably continue reviewing this annually, after that winter testing cycle, and see how the trend is continuing.
But do that cohort analysis that such rich
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I had one question. Yeah, I know, I'm always last. You thought you were done. I always ask my questions at the end. So it's just a question about when you said national standards. I guess I always realized there were some national standards that STAR put out, but I have no idea what that means per se. Like, how many students are we looking at nationally? I mean, I know about NAEP testing, and I know that's nationwide, and we compare ourselves sometimes from that point of view, but just kind of curious.
Right,
It's about 9 million.
it's more than that now. because
Okay.
I know that the STAR is bigger than IRES, the one.
Okay.
I looked
Yep.
at yesterday. They had 10.7 million students
Ah.
now in assignments. So it's definitely double-digit millions of students.
Just
And these
curious.
numbers represent the percent of our kids who are not at risk. So
Right.
for us, not at risk means above the 25th percentile national norm.
Okay,
So they're doing better than 25% of kids nationwide, just to be not at risk. Our benchmark level, our proficiency level, we look for 50th percentile.
okay,
So doing better than 50%, the same or better than 50% of students nationwide in the same grade level, in the same, window of seasonal testing.
okay. That makes sense. And then my second thing was just, I was a little surprised, and I've probably seen this before and maybe just didn't think about it. I would have expected those graphs to be opposite. Like, I would have thought the reading would have been higher and the math lower. But I'm just curious, maybe I haven't seen this data like this, presented like this before, and just kind of why.
I think it's a little bit of an anomaly of Coventry in a good way.
Yeah.
We seem to be
Strong in math.
doing better than expected in math.
Mhm.
With regard to math, especially the elementary level.
And this is not the first year. Math has been above reading in prior years as well.
Mhm. In STAR.
In STAR and Coventry. Yep.
Yeah.
But in Rhode Island, in fact, the data study that was presented on this is also showing that Rhode Island is much more above the nation in terms of proficiency in math and reading.
Mhm.
But we are unique in the situation that we're higher in math in the Northeast in particular.
Interesting.
So we're doing a good job with math and reading. Fred has an article linked in one of our slides too from New York Times about why the reading is lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it was journalists who looked at national numbers.
Mhm.
And again, her findings seem to mirror a lot of our initiatives that we've implemented, focus on structural literacy, problems with teacher shortages.
Mhm.
Try to be as correct as possible. It's always nice that we can triangulate our findings and our initiatives with what's reporting nationwide. So
Right.
we're not working in isolation, or we're not always comparing ourselves to other districts in Rhode Island. So
Right.
It's also beneficial to take another step back and look at how are we doing nationally, how are we doing nationally. That's
Mhm.
where NAEP comes in.
Mhm.
It is a national issue that we have to get we have to train educators better and also provide more professional development and support about phonics instruction,
Mhm.
explicit phonics instruction. That helps the students with dyslexia, but helps all students.
The- And the other thing we've tracked over the years that kind of differentiates elementary from secondary is the actual test itself and the students taking the test. The younger kids are excited to be on the computer. They take the tests. They are very much kind of locked into the experience. As they get older, that experience wanes. And so when you're a 9th grader, a 10th grader, an 11th grader, and you're taking the test, and you've now been taking it for 6 or 7 or 8 years, that experience doesn't seem so exciting anymore. So now we have to find ways to get students to really pour in their effort and get them motivated to take the test to the best of their ability, making sure our teachers take it seriously, make sure parents. So I don't know how many years back it was, Erin, we started sending home the parent report because we wanted parents to know how their students were doing on the STAR, because we wanted those conversations to happen at home so that kids would come in excited and
Yep.
ready to take the test. So
Exactly.
we're doing everything we can.
Right.
Yeah, we send out an email to teachers before the window to say, the test is coming, make sure you prepare your kids, make sure you take it seriously, make
Mhm.
sure you give them plenty of time. You know,
Yep.
like there's lots of things we
All
try to
that stuff.
do to
Yeah.
make sure that the testing conditions are optimal for everyone.
Right, that makes sense. So I was also excited to hear about the PD opportunities and that teachers are really relishing that. So that's wonderful to hear because it's so important. It's all about, you learn one thing back when you were in college and like education is changing all the time and the ability to stay up to date with that it's a lot of work. And so PD is really, really helpful and the varied and online and being able to actually do it on your own time schedule or whatever, which I think is really important. The other thing that I wondered when I first looked at that data and I wondered, elementary seemed to do better or bounce back better. I wondered if, and I'm sure you've thought about this, the emotional piece that I think some of our elementary kids have been more resilient over COVID. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think as you get older, the pressures that you see your parents under, the society under, your own social interactions. I know, I think our middle and high school kids probably have suffered more from an emotional point of view. I don't know if I'm not a psychologist so I don't know, but that's what hit me first, that kids are more resilient.
Another data that I was taking on about, so contact referrals took the biggest hit or increased the most over the pandemic with the middle school
Mm.
grade.
Mm.
And attendance suffered the most at the high school grade. I mean, you think about those factors you mentioned, it kind of makes
Kind of makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
Then they were also able to access our mental health supports.
Exactly. Everything tied into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think what we're really seeing here as well is benefit of trying to monitor a little bit, and special goals, compared numbers of students whose parents opted for distance learning last year.
Yeah.
And how many of those students are being referred now to special education compared to students with a similar achievement profile
Who stayed, who came. Mm.
Not to cast any judgment
No,
on the
no.
decision, but just to figure out, can we again extrapolate more of the impact of distance learning? Because I think what's becoming clear is that in person did have a positive impacts, no matter what data set we're looking at.
And in other areas of the country, right, it didn't come there.
I know they're suffering more. Yeah, I did read some data around that. So again, thank you so much for this presentation. Before we move on, was there anybody in the public that wanted to comment? You guys are all experts. Yep.
I just wanted to add a little bit to the question.
Yeah.
I think I was actually the market. So the job that people do about approving budgets and getting curriculum materials. I think you might lose track of them when they happened 10 years ago. So 10 years ago in 2012, you approved a new math series for us, which was Go Math. at that
Right.
time.
Mhm.
We've had that in place for 10 years. And although it's not highly rated any longer, it's green-lighted in multiple areas, and we have consistently been using it in K-5 for the past 10 years. And so now we're ready to take the next step,
Mhm.
right? Which is, I'd have to say I'm more approved in both the quality of the materials and the learning targets and the lessons, and in the way that it is organized for students. And we're going to start with that. So hopefully we'll see already just in the star data, the difference between Xerox and Go Math on our star data is close to
Night and day.
10 points
Mm.
difference in
That's
the classes
wonderful.
that use one versus the other.
It's big. Great. Well, thank you so much for that. All right. And again, thank you for all that hard work and the presentation. Very interesting. And I think Mr. Pierce is correct. We'd like to see this again, see what happens with the spring testing and see if we do bounce back even better. So Again, thank you. And I just want to shout out to all the teachers that worked so hard to make sure our students didn't lose as much as they could have. And so, because we were all worried about that, and it looks like they did yeoman work to keep kids engaged and moving forward. So really good news. Thank you. Yep.
Also, the teachers for having to either adopt or implement new materials simultaneously while they're in the
Yeah.
middle of the pandemic.
Exactly.
So
Huge lift, huge lift.
often says, we can't stop. We have to keep moving forward when we talk about these things.
Right.
And honestly, it's a hard push.
It is.
sometimes,
Heavy
and
lift.
I certainly want to commend the teachers for that.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I guess we can move on to number 8, which is the school committee calendar update and discussion. So that's in our packet, I believe. It was reference number 3.
So just,
Mr.
yeah, I
Levis?
just want to highlight, thanks for Ms. Patno and Mrs. Martin for identifying a couple of issues. The first one is the original meeting date was April 14th. There's a meeting that the school committee, the town council, the administration is invited to. And it's an annual meeting for the trust, but I think it's important to have representation at that. Again, I'm not telling people that they have to be there, but that's on the 14th, and we didn't know till we'd already set the calendar. So I'm asking if we could move that meeting a day before the 13th. And if we can't, like I said, I could make sure that administration, but I know the school committee and time school committee members go too. So I felt trying to move it to the 13th would make more sense. And then the second meeting was going to be moved from the May 26th, which is the all-day referendum. So we're asking to move that meeting a week earlier to May 19th. So those are the two changes that we want to present for the committee to discuss and hopefully vote on.
Okay. It looks like Mr. Florio is missing in action. So Mrs. Colunian, do you have any?
I
Comments?
can't make it on the 13th, but you would have a quorum with the 3 of you. So I have no problem with moving.
Okay. I'm just going to check and make sure it's May 19th.
Right.
I should have done this before this meeting, but May 19th. Yeah, the only thing is the world language honor night, but we can't make everything sometimes. All right, so I'm good with that. I'm okay with the 19th. Mr. Pearson?
No
Anything?
issues.
So you're good with both?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll have you. And you can't make the 13th, correct? So no Donna. So can we wait till Mr. Florio comes in?
Sure.
Just make sure that we have a
A vote.
quorum for that. Because that's still before our District 1 person will be here. I think the election's in May, right?
Correct.
So, and I don't know when they'll certify the election, so.
I believe it's early in May, but I'm not.
I think it's early in May too. I remember I
Like
put
the
the
5th or
calendar on my,
something like
I
that.
put it on my calendar. It might be a Tuesday. Is it a Tuesday? Tuesday, the 3rd, May 3rd. Elections usually are on
Okay.
Tuesdays, so. And we shouldn't take long to verify that election unless there's some mail ballots in dispute or something. So they should be sitting with us, hopefully. The meeting on the 26th. Oh, no, the 19th, sorry, because we just changed it. So, I don't know what happened to Mr. Florio. What's next anyway? Yeah, and we should wait for him for that discussion too, I would think, before we start. Okay. I heard a door. Here he's coming. Here he comes. Mr. Florio, we need your opinion. So did you have a chance to look at the calendar in the packet? Okay, and were you okay with April 13th instead of the 14th? So it's a Wednesday instead of a Thursday.
Yes.
You could make that. So we have our quorum because the only reason we waited for you to come back is because Donna can't make that meeting. Okay, and then the switch on the 19th as opposed to May 26th.
Sure.
That's fine?
That's-
Okay. Looks like we're good. So are we ready to move on this?
Sure. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the updated school community calendar as presented / amended.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the necessity of school construction process update presentation and discussion.
Sure.
I'm going to turn that over to you, Mr. Levis, to start.
Yeah, so to kind of summarize how we got here, there's been some dialogue. Some of the, one of the former school building committee members had reached out to town council members and questioned, what was going to happen with the building. And, we had our last school building committee meeting and it was pretty, people were frustrated. Many of the members talked about, and again, you can watch it, so I'm not going to speak for them, but just to kind of summarize, there was a lot of frustration about 2 years of investment. It was we felt it's an incredibly talented team. And a lot of frustration, but what was really, I don't want to say poignant, but many of the members felt like they're not sure if they'd want to commit to this again because of all the work and just feeling. And again, you can watch it. It's on our website. It's the last school building committee meeting that's listed there. And there's a lot of frustration, and so there was an email questioning, and then it was basically indicated that the council president, and it's in my slide here, had reached out to Ms. Patino and said that I've asked Ms. Patino to talk to the superintendent about these 4 points. And, I'm not here to rehash, my feelings, personal feelings about the process, and that, I didn't feel like there was, honestly, all I'll state is that I felt like the administration wasn't supportive from the get-go. And I've talked about that before in comments and even different things that were set up with the town and different meetings that took place. And, we know that I talked to Mr. Murray today. He's reached out to the, filed with the Attorney General's office to get that document that we never received. So, so I guess what I wanted to have a conversation is with the school committee tonight. These are the requests of Dr. Dixon, and I just put them on a slide. I have my thoughts, but I'd like to hear what the committee thinks first, and then I have a recommendation that I think would be a next step without committing to doing anything. But what I don't like is I talk here, we talk here, they have comments at there. I think there needs to be a meeting where we come together and kind of hash this out before we say, oh yeah, let's move forward, give us a number, because honestly, we already did that, And the last thing I'll say is that the voters of Coventry approved that $250 million bonus bond that 24 other communities have tapped into, but they didn't have the opportunity. Those same voters that voted for that never got the opportunity to vote for this bond. So to me, that, doesn't really make sense. But anyways, that's why I'd just like to know where the committee stands. And I guess, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to throw my recommendation out is just to kind of plant seeds, is that we should invite the town council to one of our meetings and have a conversation, because my feeling is not what's changed, right? And to go through the motions and for them to throw a number like, well, we could afford 30 million, where professionally and personally, I don't believe that we couldn't afford to do it. I honestly don't. I felt like the numbers that we used were skewed. So my feeling would be, let's, not to put words in Mr. Pearson's mouth, but we've said a couple of times, like, let's hold them accountable hold them to the fire. I feel the way we can do this, have a dialogue face to face and invite them to our meeting and have a conversation and see if we can come to some agreement. Because if we can't rectify the past, my feeling is why move forward? I do not feel like going through the motions, but as other individuals in the committee has said, we have a responsibility to this community, and I can't just hold a grudge because I feel like the whole process was skewed and we were undermined. I need to do my job, which is to advocate for this community, our students, our staff. This community needs new structures. Our buildings, every single day in the winter, students are cold in Coventry Public Schools, and it shouldn't be that way. And it's not because people aren't working hard. It's because our facilities are falling apart and we haven't had the resources. So my feeling, again, cut to the chase. My feeling is we should have a joint meeting and talk about where do we go from here and have some open and honest dialogue. So it isn't just put on, well, it's up to the school committee to reconstitute the process. So.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Okay, we'll start with Mr. Florio.
I agree with Mr. Levis. I think we should have a meeting with the town council because I believe they want to have a school building committee and they want to update our schools. And they have to trust us as we have to trust them. I'm just speaking from the heart on this. I think we need to meet. I really do. I think we have to get this resolved. And I think we have to meet for the benefit of our community because our community is split between those who want it and those who don't. We have to get together and we have to fix this. And the only way we're going to fix this is with the town council. And we have to be partners in this, like we were in the previous school building committee in 2000. We all have to be partners on this if this is going to work. We can't have people in the background or people saying this is too expensive or that too expensive. We have to and we have to work together because in my opinion, something is better than nothing, but that something has to be effective. So it's just not a number. It's common sense, reason, and logic, which is what we need. We need to sit down with the council and make a plan. And the only way we're going to do that is by sitting down, getting together, and hashing it all out. And I believe Mr. Levis is absolutely correct. So that's my take, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mrs. Colonian.
Mr. Levis, I agree with you. I think that, and not us go to the town council meeting, have them come to our meeting because it's about our schools. And, and as far as doing all of this, we've done all of this before. And then they turned around and said, no, sorry, you're not doing. So we need them here. Like you said, hold their feet to the fire. We need them here to hash everything out, to get a plan that everybody can work with. If they think that, and I know this was done before, but if they can come and tell us exactly not, well, give it to us and we'll let you know. No, tell us what you want us to do and then we'll do it. But not just, well, you do it and then we'll tell you if we like it or not. It has to be, we have to have a dialogue. We have to. We've got to be able to hash it out and everyone has to be here. So I agree with you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clooney. And Mr. Pearson.
I also agree that I want to say it's almost like starting from scratch, but not quite. But keep in mind, 4 of the current council members were not on council when we started this process last time. So I think it would be a good idea to have the meeting and level set expectations, including backing up a bit and saying, here's how the building committee is formed. Here's, each of our responsibilities in that. as you mentioned, our current building committee members may not be enthusiastic about recommitting. But we have to do everything we can to keep the talent there if possible. So, working with the council on how to approach that aspect of it as well. Setting expectations, not really, I don't want the council giving us expectations. But setting expectations for, what is the purpose of the building committee and what does each town council member hope to receive. We have the meeting I heard where they rejected the plan. One of the members thought they were at McDonald's. They wanted a menu list of options to choose from. I like this one, but not that. Give me options here. This isn't a Happy Meal. This is a building project. So we need to make sure the expectations are clear. If they want options, then that has to be the charter of the building committee to put together multiple options. But it's not a, again, it's not a fast food menu. So we can't have the expectation that they can pick the things they like and the things they don't like. If we have a building committee, it's a trusted advisor. We have to have faith in the proposal they put forward that we can put to voters and give voters the chance to vote on this, which again, they were denied that opportunity. So yes, I do like that idea. I think we need some kind of joint, either they come here, we have a joint meeting. Joint meeting is nice because it's kind of neutral ground. They're not coming to a school committee meeting or we're not going to a council meeting. Whatever works. It just has to be, everyone has to be in agreement and be able to approach this in a professional manner. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. And in fact, I'm almost thinking that we should have a joint meeting, not at one of our regularly scheduled, only because I think when that happens, things get compressed or, we're put on or they're put on. I mean, so late that people are just like, they've already done all the business of that meeting. And then all of a sudden you're going to have this joint thing discussion. And so I'm almost thinking that it would be better just to do it as a one meeting. Maybe in an off week when there's not a council meeting or a school committee meeting that people can actually make. Because there's been a preponderance of meetings. And so people are getting, I think, meetinged out a bit, I suspect. And I know that we're going to the council on Monday and, that 8:30 start is really kind of late. And it would have been wonderful if we were first on that, but that doesn't seem to be the mindset. And so, 8:30 is, people who work full time and have busy lives, all of us do. That's late. That's very late. And so you lose focus. And so I would rather have, even if it was a Saturday meeting, that was open and public here, that people could come and attend. I think it's really important for our new building committee to understand what that number is going to be. You can say all you want. We already know the need. So like Mr. Pearson said, we don't have to start from scratch, but we do if we're given a really low number. We can say all we want that, the Jacobs report said how many million, and then stage 1 and 2 said, this is just the beginning. We never promised that 89 million was going to solve everything, not even a little bit. And if people had been able to attend all of those school building committees, the members knew that was just the start. It was just the start. And so this community is in dire need of a plan for the future, but any plan will have no teeth if we don't have any money behind it. So what good is a plan that says, 5 years from now, we're going to do this. And then, or a year from now, we're going to do this. I mean, we had hoped that we would be part of this bond initiative that everybody from the state basically agreed to and paid for, including us. But I'm thinking we've missed that window, quite honestly, and trying to catch that window now is a big lift for everyone involved. And so I would rather and hope that in November, there is a bond that comes forward. There's talk about that on the state level, and that the voters of Rhode Island will again issue a new bond. Because even even when we had those first discussions from Seth Magaziner and the whole plan, it wasn't a one-time deal. It was never a one-time deal on the state side. And if you look at some other states that do a better job of making sure there's capital investments in their school buildings, it's done every few years. And that's the strategic piece if you're going to talk about it. There is so much need in Coventry and in the state that even the second bond initiative isn't going to get it all done. So that's kind of why they put that little caveat in about the maintenance need, so that you had to at least take care of the buildings once you've built them. And so again, all that has to be looked at, and that's a big new start. And just the very fact that we're going to have to hire someone to do the consulting work, because you can't just take stage 1 and stage 2 from the last thing and say, okay, we're just going to pick and choose out of this. It's not going to work that way. It's going to be started again, and it's going to take time. And the best we can hope for is that the second bond does get passed by the stakeholders in this state, and that we can jump on board with at least that one, and get some real, a higher percentage than our typical school aid that we get back.
Can I just add though, I think that's all great, but I'm not even concerned about, I'm concerned more about the working relationship with the council and the administration. And then that's where, I agree with some of what Mr. Florio said, but some of it is that I'm not going to just jump in and I need to see that things have changed, because I feel like it's still not resolved. And that was the sentiment why I brought up the school building committee, because that's a sentiment of taxpayers, parents, professionals in the field. And again, I'm not going to put words in their mouth. You could watch that and see the frustration and I think that's what stemmed from one of the members reaching out to the school committee. There were comments made about, well, I'm concerned about spending $500,000 on a roof in the middle school. And then they said, well, especially if we're going to renovate it. Well, we're not right now. I mean, and if we do, it's going to be a few years out, and we have to move around rooms because we have leaks. And so we still need, that's the part that blows me away. Is like, we had an opportunity, we had a plan. Somebody had asked me about, well, NEASC accreditation. Don't we need to do the gym floors? Well, we do. And I'm going to let NEASC know that, we had a plan. We went and spent 2 years, but I can't just come and say next year we're going to do the gym floors, because we need an architect, and we don't have that anymore. And the third part is we may have to pay back that $150,000. Our agreement was to go through the process. I mean, the process was stopped by the council. That's my opinion. Like, it didn't go to the voters and then it shut down. So that's another conversation we have to have. And so I agree with Mr. Pearson though, about creating those ground rules. And I really feel like they need to understand when Mr. Pearson's talking about the menu there, that blew me away. Like, they had a project in front of them, yes or no. Not saying, well, somebody said, well, what if we do the 7 million here? What if we just invest 10 million at the high school? Like, that's not their prerogative. Like, I'm pretty familiar with the necessity of school construction process just from being involved with it and looking and meeting with Dr. De Silva and Mario Carena. And I feel like, once you put that building committee together, which, has membership of the school committee and the council, they come up, they assess the need, and they put forward a proposal, right? And the last thing I'll say is that I've never had more meetings, I feel, that with a council about a project than we did. And part of what, I know, and people may not be happy, but part of it is there was concerns about people even being attentive at meetings. And I feel that if we're going to move forward, we need to make sure that there isn't lip service. We're in this process because our schools are in dire strait. And we said that, Mr. Martin, who's in Situate now, but he did yeoman's work just keeping things together. And like, at the end of the day, you're thinking maybe, and everybody wanted that, but maybe that's part of the problem now. Like, we need to just let things, like, be honest and say, we can't use duct tape. We're not going to just keep these things working and going, because we're at a point now where many things are about to fail. And, we don't have a plan. And even with the maintenance requirement, and we talked about our budget, how we put that outside, that's going to meet the requirement. It's not going to address our needs. And I think we've been clear about that. So I I'm glad that you agreed that we can have a meeting, and I like the idea of having a, neutral joint meeting. But then I think the real hard work has to be, we have to come up with a really concrete agenda. I don't want to go just back and forth, but I think for us to move forward and for the school committee, because we're going to be in the same situation, there'll be, the potential to have many new school committee members through this process, or several, right? We'll have one new person entering May, and there could be more later on. I'm not saying, my point is that I think we really need the support more than ever of everybody going into this process. So I will, I'll work with you, Madam Chair, and we can talk to Dr. Dixon and try to come up with a date, recognizing there's a lot going on in the next few weeks, but we'll try to come up with a date that works for everybody. And it just has this agenda. We're not, we won't do anything else with it. It'll just be this. So, and we'll do it early, like 6 o'clock. So, all right. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Were there any comments from the public? I know we have former school building committee members in our presence. We're good? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, on that. So the next one is number 10, which is the Monday meeting with Coventry Public Schools Administration, Town Council member, and auditor to discuss fund balance. So I guess you want to start that.
Well,
Mr.
yeah, but I
Lewis,
was
and
going to
we
ask
have-
Mr. DeVerner to come up to the podium here. We're going to, and Mr. Sands was also part, and Mr. Coward was part of that too. I was not part of that meeting, but I did debrief with everybody afterwards. So I don't know how you want to proceed here. I I appreciate you put together a nice document in our packet. So I will turn it over to Mr. DeVerner and obviously Mr. Sands and Mr. Coward, if you guys want to jump in.
We can't notice it, so you might be feeling it a lot. You might be feeling a lot weirder than. Is the bottom, just turn it, yeah.
Is it on? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we spoke about this before. If you look at the handout that was in the packet, that was basically an agenda for this meeting that we've been trying to have, where we outlined basically the due to, due from, with the starting point being the most recent audited financial statements from June 30th, 2020. And, there's been a lot of different topics that have been tossed around for discussion between the school and the town. But we felt that this was a good starting point because it was very simple. It's based in fact. And with the current audit ongoing, there was really a need to agree that it was a starting point and that we needed to move forward, working together to reconcile for another year. But it also became clear that there was just so many changes over time, with administration on both sides, changes in processes, bank accounts, the way the accounting was done, and that it was good to get everybody in the room together. So we had the meeting with the town had Lisa Mills and the town manager, Ben Marchant was present. There were 2 members of the town council, basically more as observers. Don attended, myself, Harold, we had Sarah Mangiarelli. And then we also had from the auditors, we had the lead audit partner, engagement partner, Ron, and then the audit manager, Stephen. And we felt that was important because, they're the independent auditors. They could speak to the facts of it so that we really couldn't argue over something that was agreed to in the past. So I don't know, is it possible to bring up that handout or is that not in there? I mean, it's if you all received it as part of it, I don't need to go through it in detail. But you can ask me questions, certainly, if you have any. It really just starts with the audited financial statements from looking at highlighting the balances of the due from other funds and due to other funds, and that you have columns where The far left column is a liability, shows the liability from the town, and it corresponds with large assets under the school side, right? And those match up. I think one thing that isn't clear to everybody is that they're called due from other funds or due to other funds instead of due to school and due from, due to school. The way that financials are put together is they group general ledger accounts together. And that's why there was been a big push to get the auditor grouping so we could clearly show, hey, the bulk of this balance is due to school from the town and that we have accounts that correspond with that. It was good to have the meeting and provide the background so that the first few agenda items were provide a background and a history of the due from accounts and why they were used, because the new town administration coming in early last year never really experienced it, right? It was used because the school never had its own bank accounts, right? When the school doesn't have its own bank accounts and you're using mom and dad's, right, sort of to give a comparison, you have to do some dual accounting and track whose funds, things belong to by using these due to, due froms. And there was a regular reconciliation of those on a monthly basis and definitely on an annual basis that both the town side and the school side had to reconcile. They'd see where the differences were. They'd work cooperatively together to get any variances down to something that would be immaterial, and they could just make a small adjustment if needed. If you look on the town's website, there's audited financials going back to at least 2010, and these due to other funds and due from other funds, these balances exist, and there's always been this large asset from the school side and a large liability from the town side. We were able to explain why it was never transferred over before, because if the school didn't have its own bank account, there's nowhere to transfer the funds. So you're not, at the end of the year, you're just sort of tracking what's accumulating and fluctuating year over year as a balance due to the school. So,
And Chris, if I can interrupt for a second, because it was reconciled monthly and yearly by both sides, there was always an agreement carried from month to month, year to year of what the due to, due from was. Because we didn't have our own account, we weren't transferring anything anywhere. We were just keeping a ledger of what that number was. And so we were always in agreement that there was a number, and as that number changed, we just kept reconciling it so we can keep track of it.
Exactly. And the annual audits are going to make sure that that's done. So, you're going to shore up your reconciliation. If your reconciliation was pretty good, any given month, but it better be good at the balance sheet date, because part of their audit procedures are going to be to look at it and make sure that both sides are in agreement. And then the town puts forth these as, they're representing these as their own financial statements. And they put it forth for the users of them, which are it's everybody in the town, the residents, anybody that does business with the town. And they've done this for years. So it really shouldn't have been very hard to agree. Once you had the understanding of it, it shouldn't really be hard to agree that that was the starting point. Although we did spend a lot of time on item E, which was to review and agree the existence of the due to, due from balances as of the most recent audited financial statements of 6/30/2020.
And the other challenge, Chris, if I also need to interject, is that due to, due from requisitions were paper-based, binder-based. It wasn't electronic, quicken kind of thing. So we have binders. We have ours. I don't know about the town side, but we have our binders. And Chris was quick to pull one out and show everybody at the table, like, this is what it looks like. And so the tracking of it's a little bit different when you're looking at a paper-based, binder-based system versus a system where you can pull things up.
What is concerning to me, and I wasn't part of that meeting though, but I've been part of all this dialogue from the get-go, and then with the town manager's infamous memo, that there's been denial that these funds even exist. And that's the problem for me, is that early on, and I'm glad that we were coming to a point where we can move forward. But Harold and I had a meeting, and they're saying to us, where's the money? To us, where's the money? And if you look at these audited statements, the money exists in those audited statements. The 10 from 2010 on, And, what's even more alarming to me is, are they challenging every single audit that's ever been approved by the town council? And so that's what, to me, is that, like, that's what's really happening. And is anybody articulating that? Because, when Chris came on board, and because now we had somebody else to work with Harold to look at all this, prior to that, we had Harold and the clerks doing this work. It was pretty obvious, I think, to you that this just jumped out at you. And that's why, obviously, I have, I've been in this in since the get-go here, and Chris coming on board looks at it much more objective maybe than I do. But I think it's important to recognize that there was, we've come from where's the money, as if we've mismanaged it or we lost it or we don't know, to this point now where there's at least an acknowledgement, and we'll talk, Chris will talk a little bit more about what the amount is, and then we can figure out when are we going to get it. Because the last thing I'll say is, before John Arnett left, I met with John Arnett, and there's this $350,000 that he opened an account when we moved our account. But he was going to put in at the time almost about $4 million, transfer that so that, and that was what he believed at the time was the fund balance that existed on their side. And that was, I think, in 2020, in the summer of 2020. But then things transpired. He left, and so we know, and they'll admit that there was $350,000 that opened an account. But at the time, there was going to be about $4 million put in,
Added to it.
but it never happened.
Right. And, I think it's a good point. When we talked about having the auditors there and really looking at the financial statements, there's been this reconciliation on a regular basis, every month and annually for the audit. But the most relevant one would be the last time all parties, basically shook hands, agreed on what the balance was, and then, represented it in their financial statements, and allowed auditors to, audit the underlying balances and make sure that both sides, agree. If the balances didn't reconcile between the town and the school, there would be a problem for the audit, right? That they would have a problem there. They would make sure that there was an adjustment, and make sure that the balances did agree to each other. So that really should be the starting point. There's been different, doubts, I guess, cast upon the balance, or we don't understand what it is. So I think that's why it was important to give that whole background on how everything used to work. The physical binders that you spoke about, they are large binders for each year that we had. I don't know what their records are, but they had to do a similar process. It was very time consuming, and it took a lot of bandwidth from the staff in both offices. And that's why there was discussion with Sarah and the prior town administration to move to having the school's own accounts. Because if you did that, then this back and forth, the school could account for it through its own accounting records, and that you didn't have to have this dual accounting, and the due to, due from reconciliation didn't have to be so labor intensive. So that was the idea. The plan was to transfer over the funds that have been accumulated. That was, it was a liability from the town to the school, would be to transfer that over, and that would help the school, manage cash flow with its now having its own accounts. That still hasn't transferred over yet. So, just everybody needs to keep that in mind. That's a big change. If you're ever talking about school cash flow, there's a big change, and the reason to have their own, when they're going to transfer their own accounts, the reason was they were going to fund it with what was due from the town. And so that was it. There was hesitant. There was, I would say the town did want to move on from item E, which was really agreeing that was a starting point. And we were pretty firm with saying that there's really no purpose in continuing if we can't agree to the own audited financials. And if we can't, we sort of need to know why. So that sounds like the town is questioning their own audited financials. And is there a basis for doing so? Do you have a basis, or is it just that we don't want to agree to do that? So there was there was a lot of discussion on this topic and a lot of points the auditors were vocal about it, as you know, when we asked them questions on it, and they spoke about limited resources. So it seems strange to want to go back if you have limited resources and a staffing shortage to try to go back in time to reprove something that both sides have agreed to and have been audited without any basis or evidence that it's a worthwhile undertaking, and really pushed back and said that should be a decision the town council comes to if they believe that their own financials are flawed. So the town council and the town administration members adjourned and came back, and then they agreed to say that was a starting point. They're agreeing with the 6/30/2020 due from balances, with a caveat that if they did find evidence of a material misstatement, and that they could bring forward such evidence. But I think that's unlikely. There's really no basis for it, and you would have to see evidence and make it of something material before they spend the time going backwards. So that's going to be our starting point. And we presented, Sarah has worked on an updated reconciliation to take us to the current audit of 6/30/2021. That's been provided to Lisa Mills for review, for her to either accept or come up with her own reconciliation and then see if we have any differences. So that's in her court now. We presented our reconciliation and are waiting word on if there's any differences from her. Because we do know that the auditors did say that initially the 6/30/2021 balances from the school side and the town side did not agree, and that they weren't close. So we were pushing that issue of making sure we work to reconcile that so that we did not hold up the current audit, anymore. So with that, I don't know if there's any other questions. I think I touched on most of.
Can you just highlight, if you don't mind, what we believe the approximate fund balance is effective June 30th of 2020?
So it's due to the schools, as of the most recent audited financials of June 30th, 2020, was $5,850,747. There was acknowledgement that there were going to be subsequent transactions that would be credited against that. It's going to take it down, a few $1,000,000. So Sarah's been working on, the reconciliation to bring us to 6/30/2021 and apply certain credits, against it. So it's a lower number. She doesn't expect it to be that 5.8. I think we were down
3.5. Yeah, 3, but still significant. I think what's significant about this is that conversation that's taken place about cash flow. We've been honest about it, but the difference is that if money had, it's just circumstances. If money had been transferred over, because what frustrates me is that there's been public conversation that we're, irresponsible, we're deficit spending. There was even comments about receivership. But if we had that cash flow, as we talked tonight, we could be purchasing vans and saving significant amount of money every year on our transportation costs, which will benefit everybody. And we talked about how it's going to benefit special ed students that are waiting, or foster kids are waiting 2 weeks to get transportation. So not only financially, it's in the best interest, but we don't have the cash to do it. But I think there's a difference between this cash flow that we've had and not being responsible. And that's, to me, the point that, and Chris is very professional and very, but there's been a lot of push about this money. And so I applaud, those of you that were part of that meeting to get them to say, yes, we recognize this. But now the next part is, well, how are we going to get these funds? And, and so it's not, it's not over. And like he said, I think it's significant that there's a significant difference between, reconciling the balances, right? So I'm optimistic because I know the council has said if we owe the schools money and it's recorded, give it to them, right?
Right.
So we're going to know fairly quickly that probably at least $3.5 million is owed to us, but that'll help us with our cash flow because it's not, when we run into these issues, it's because we have money coming in, it's just not coming in fast enough. It's not like if we have $3.5 million, we're going to spend $3.5 million. It's not free money, right? You approve everything that we spend, right? Everything is in the budget. And if we need to transfer monies over a certain amount, we need to come. So I just want to highlight that we've been behind the scenes and I can't tell you how much time it's taken to get to a spot where we should have been when the 2020 audit came in, right? And that's where I go back to my other conversation about trust and ground rules because we can't continue to do this. It just isn't sustainable, doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Yep. And it needs to be reconciled for the current audit. The auditors were present and they spoke to that. So to have the 6/30/21 audit complete, you can't have a material difference between these two balances. So we're gonna have to work together on that. And it really, because of that's the other thing, whenever there's discussion of cash flow, people really need to understand the changes that have happened in the last few years and how the school, moving away from this due from and having its own bank accounts is a significant change from, all the previous years where you just used mom and dad's bank account. So, people just need to have that awareness and it should not be as hard to reconcile through this year because the school has its own bank account. There's a lot less activity, a lot less transactions that impact that due from than if you were, talking about a few years ago where everything went through the town's bank account. So if there's any questions,
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm just going to ask Mr. Florio any questions about this.
Chris, what you're telling me is not unfamiliar. I serve on another board and we won a lawsuit. The town to pay us $100,000. What they did was they sent it to the wrong fire department. The fire department cashed the check. And our lawyer's in a quandary about there's a lot involved in this. And I've never seen this kind of mismanagement, but I don't know if it's just not really sure about what they're doing or if they're doing it on purpose, but I don't see any maliciousness in this. I'm just saying, and as a board member of a fire department that received a ruling that we were supposed to get $100,000 and they sent it to the wrong fire district. And that fire district cashed the check and will not return it to the town. Now, what's the town doing? We're gonna have to obviously write us another check for $100,000 and go after the other fire department for the money that they gave. But it's, what you're saying is not unfamiliar to me, because this has been happening all over town, from what I understand, with other departments and there's issues that are happening that we're not even aware of. And the only way you're going to get that money is to hold their feet to the fire and say, look, we're owed this money. And we want the money that we are owed. It's not a question of whether it's not an option. It's not an option whether you pay us or not. We need the money. And we need the money now. So, and I don't know how you can do that, Chris. I'm not an attorney. I was a former law enforcement official, but I don't know how you can do this. I don't know if what the options are.
Well,
I know we're looking at them. I know Arthur Reed, our attorney, is looking at it. And Fred Tobin's looking at it. But we're trying to be reasonable with the town at the same time, because this just could have been an honest mistake.
Yeah, to try to answer, what you're discussing right now, I think this came up out of, there was the town council meeting in, I think it was December 13th, where members of the town council asked, do we owe them money? And the town administration couldn't answer that other than saying, well, we're looking into it. There's reconciliations. It seems weird. So it wasn't a clear answer. And
I don't know what you do with a court order.
Yeah, well, I think right now, just highlighting to anybody that was present in those meetings or anybody that, in the public, they should know that the town's audited financials that they represent and they put on their website contain these balances, and this is where it is. So its existence, that's what we really wanted to come to agreement and highlight in this meeting. I'll give the background to it, but the existence of these balances, that we were in agreement that the town owed the school this amount as of the last audited financials, and that we do this every audit, right? We agree to the amounts. It may be hard for people to identify it buried in, financial statements that not everybody's looking for or really understands the balances that make it up. But that became clear to more people, I guess, through these meetings. And I think people in town council now understand that these balances do exist. And if there's ever questions again about school cash flow and the town council asks, well, do we owe them money? There's no arguing it anymore, right? They do owe money, and we're working on to
Figuring out
get to
that
the
number.
new audited amount. But if a town is going to point fingers at cash flow concerns, but admit to owing money and not being willing to transfer it, that's something for the town council and the town, I guess, to discuss in their meetings.
And Chris, I think, and if I'm mischaracterizing it, tell me, but I think that was the positive outcome of a pretty lengthy meeting, was the acknowledgement of that there is an amount owed, and that they need to, on their side, go through some of their paperwork to make sure that they can come up with the number that, we believe it to be. So we're in agreement on that. And that the 2020 audit was the starting point.
That's the starting point.
And
right?
so
There's no reason
to walk away from the table with those two things, I think are positive things. And because, all of the other stuff is important, but there was positive outcome. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Harold and Chris created an agenda that we stuck to and weren't willing to deviate from until we, got to where we needed to be.
Yeah, that's
Sounds
what
good.
that's what needs to be done. Because there's a lot of new people, and I don't think anything's malicious. I don't think there's malfeasance. I just think they don't know. And I think they need to be taught. I think they need help, is what I believe. So that's how we're going to handle it. We're going to try to help them through it and help ourselves through it as well. So so you did a good job, Chris, because as an auditor, you explained it correctly, and Harold, you did a great job as well. And that's what they need. They need to know this stuff, and they don't have to see us as the enemy. They have to see us as partners in making things better. So thank you, Chris. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you. Sarah Mangiarelli played a large part in this too, just having that historical
She had the
background and
history.
everything. Yes, so her attendance and involvement in this is
Critical and
very,
crucial.
very critical and crucial. Yes.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Mrs. Cludian?
Thank you. I appreciate your explanation, and, I totally understand everything that you said, and I know it was tireless and there was a lot of work involved for everyone, including Sarah, who isn't even part of this anymore. And she's still right there
Consulting.
helping out, so I really appreciate it. And, and hopefully they know, all right, they owe us money. We're not running at a deficit. We're very, responsible people, and we can move on from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cludian. Mr. Pearson?
Thank you for for the presentation and doing this work. I don't want to say anything bad. You guys, I appreciate the work you've done because this has been lingering, I think, for too long and holding up the audit. So the sooner we get the audit, the better. I guess I do have a question. Did the town indicate how long it would take them to come up with their reconciliation number? Or?
Yeah, we did ask that, and there was no firm commitment to time.
I bet.
It sounded like a matter of weeks, but that we were going to start with the 6/30/20, and there was no need or basis to go back, further and try to, question those figures. So at least we're there. We shared Sarah's, and we are hoping that, we hear from them within a matter of weeks.
Yeah, you've clearly done your part. My concern is not for you. It's just in general that, the town is again going into potentially approving a budget without an audit. It's a little scary. Actually, it's very scary because the last time we did that, there was a $3 million or multi-million-dollar surplus that no one knew about, but they raised taxes anyway. So I hate to walk into that same kind of situation. But again, not your fault. I appreciate what you've done and look forward to finally putting this to rest and getting that transfer as soon as possible. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I do think the town council members are now informed of this, and they know about the meeting. So I think it would be great if they could help keep that ball rolling, because they have our reconciliation. And if they have differences, we'd love to sit down and meet and try to work out any.
Dr.
differences.
Dixon, actually, I was reading the agenda for the town council, and her president report is her summary or a summary of the same meeting. So I'm going to be interested in hearing what the summary is. Monday night. Yes, it's right before the joint meeting, I believe. So
One more question. If this went to court, they would be looking at an interest penalty for waiting until June 30th, and we'd be looking at more money than 3.5 million if the judgment ordered interest to be paid retroactively. I don't know if that's anything you discussed or
yeah,
something.
Dave, I just want to say, we're not looking to go to court because, first of all, we need the money, as Mr. Pearson said. When are we gonna, we're looking forward to a transfer,
Okay.
and the legal system, in my experience at least,
Takes forever.
takes a long time.
Yeah,
So,
it does.
and we're working with them. I think,
We don't penalize them.
my frustration with this whole process has been that two parts. One is it's made us look like we're the irresponsible ones. And I think, my memo in response in the subsequent meeting of council members individually with Mr. Sands and sometimes Ms. Mandrelli and Mr. DeVerner, I think has clarified that that the issues really, while we're all in a learning curve, as Chris said, there's a lot of newness on both sides. However, we're kind of like back where we should have been a long time ago. And people are talking about efficiencies and wasting money and making sure that we're being held accountable. This has been, to me, I don't think this has been necessary. It's not something we had to go through to get to a point where we both are in agreement. It should never have happened in my eyes and professionally, not my personal opinion. I'll keep aside, but professionally, my frustration has been, we don't have the time, the luxury. We've been in a pandemic. We're trying to take care of kids and take care of staff. And we've wasted a lot of time to get here. And there's been a lot of negative comments made about the schools, I believe. And it's also impacted, I believe, the bond process. And so I think, and that's why I want to be positive about where a new starting point, but I'm not going to let go not let go, but forget that when are things going to change? Even if we get our money, when are things going to change? Because we have to work together and things need to change. And that's my piece. But again, I want to thank Don and Chris and Harold and Sarah because they stuck to the agenda and it wasn't easy.
Right, I
Right?
can imagine.
Sticking to that agenda was not just like kumbaya. It was a challenge to keep that agenda true, and they did an incredible job. And so I want to thank them. And so we're optimistic. I want to hear what Dr. Dixon says because hopefully I hear some similarities. If not, at least we know where we stand. And we will keep you informed of the process. And we need to get those funds because they're holding us up from doing some other things that we've approved, but we don't have the cash to do. So again, thank you guys for your efforts.
And so from my perspective, again, I want to thank you for, how long was the meeting, by the way? You said it was long, so.
Yeah, I want to say it was close to 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that there was some kind of a meeting of the minds and actually saying either agree with your auditor's report from 2020 or not. And if you don't, then you've got a lot of work to do, quite honestly. So I'm really think that's a really positive step. Again, I think I share the concerns of all of us in hoping that the audit for this, FY22 or June 30th, 21 is done sooner rather than later. Because we should go into the FY23 budget season knowing where we all stand. I think it's dangerous if that doesn't happen. And I think Mr. Pearson is 100% correct on that. So hopefully that's the timing they're thinking in their head that has to get done. Because I think we would feel much more comfortable. And then once it's agreed upon, then that money can be transferred and we can actually get our hands on it and use it. So I think I want to comment a little bit about what happened in the past, only because I think the school committee, I think from the very beginning felt that the issues being raised by finance on the town side should really have been handled by the professionals that do this for a living. I am not an accountant. Please don't ask me to audit the school funds. I have no idea. I have to look at expertise like the hired auditors of the town and or the expertise in our own finance department that tells the school committee this is what's going on. So one of the very first requests that came from the town council was, we want a joint meeting with the school committee and we need you to come I basically refused. And we basically as a group kind of said, no, that's not appropriate. What are we going to say to the situation? And so I'm saddened that the town council, a fairly newly inexperienced town council, was dragged into this as somehow people that were going to get this done. Because it wasn't their role, quite frankly, which is why we didn't attend that joint meeting. And I know Mrs. Clooney and I were in the audience at the meeting where this was all discussed because we were there for another reason as well. And we were kind of like pointed out, like, why didn't you come? You're here, you had the time to be here for a joint meeting. And it was from a philosophical reason that we weren't there to talk and field questions from the town council, because that's an administration role. And anyone who understands the governance in this state between school committees, town councils, and leadership on both sides, the management piece, understands that is not our role. We do have oversight of, our budget, obviously, but we take our walking orders from the expertise that we hire. And quite honestly, the school committee and the town council only hires the top gun. So I only talk to Craig, basically. We don't go and say, hey, Mr. Coward, how come this isn't getting done? Or Mr. Sands, you're doing a lousy job, or you're doing a great job. We don't do that. That's micromanaging, and it's not the role of our governance model in this state. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but that's not the role here. And so I can understand that the town council, they're young in the sense of, not young in the sense, but they're inexperienced. So, you know, this has been, the last couple of years has been, you know, Zoom meetings. There hasn't been a lot of PD given to us as an elected body, and as well as the town council. So they were dragged into a situation where it wasn't appropriate. So I just want to state on the record that I think we did the right thing trying to stay out of it and leaving it to the professionals, because ultimately that's who solved it. Because that makes sense that you are the people, that's your professional degrees. You know, you're the guys that are going to actually look at the audit and say, hey, we got to start somewhere. So what are you going to agree to? And so dragging us all in, and even on this meeting, I could have gone, but I said, no, philosophically, that's wrong. That's not my role to go to that meeting and try to figure it out. So I just had to get that off my whatever, and try to explain why the school committee as a group decided that leave it to the professionals on both sides of the street. So we are all for joining forces with the town council and being equal partners in what we have to do in the work that's coming forward. But we are not the people who are going to solve this issue. You guys are the ones that solve that issue, not us. And so I just want to state that publicly. And I am just so thankful that we have gotten to that point. But obviously, our participation didn't get you there. And I'm not even sure if the town council participation got you there. It's really basically you, the professionals, sat down and said, okay, we have to solve this. Where are we going to go from here? You did your homework. They did some of their homework as well. And again, new people on both sides of the street. I get all that. But the elected body shouldn't have been involved. That's my opinion. And I think that's probably all of our opinion. So again, I thank you 100% to everyone who did go to that meeting and the agenda that was stuck to. And obviously it was, even if it was subjective in a lot of ways, ultimately ended up being an objective look at where we stand right now. So again, hopefully this audit can get pushed through. Hopefully the auditors feel the same thing that we feel. And we start the real budget season for FY23 with this well in hand and ready to be rubber stamped and agreed to. So any other comments, questions?
Just I agree wholeheartedly. I think, you know, I just want to say, I'm not sure if that meeting would have taken place in a timely manner if it wasn't for some of the intervention of maybe the town council president or, you know, some of the council members behind the scene. We've always been willing to meet and address this. So, and I just want to, the last thing I'll say about the audit is that we met and I said, we need to make sure we do everything on our part, because to make sure that if the audit doesn't get done in time, because there's been some of that pointing the finger and we didn't do this in the past. And even before Harold was here and Chris was here. So, you know, my directive, I don't say directive, but I've met with these guys and said, hey, please make sure we do everything. We know everything we need to give them. And I think the reconciliation is a big piece. So, you know, the ball's in their court. So if the audit isn't done in time, you know, we're going to make sure we've done our part for that. So, because that's important. I agree wholeheartedly. The audits really haven't been done for a lot of reasons in a timely manner. I think in all the years I've been here, there's always been a struggle. So we're going to make sure we do our part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Was there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this particular topic? Doesn't appear to. Okay. So I guess we are to item number 11, agenda item 11, the superintendent's report. So you're back on.
So the COVID update, a couple things is that I just want to share some interesting data. On January 7th, the week ending January 7th, we had 55 staff that tested positive and 258 students. So I know we're only Thursday, we have tomorrow to go through, but as of today, this week, we have one staff that tested positive in 4 students, and 2 of those students are at the high school. So, I think we've seen a drastic change, and I been around schools and since the masking, and just see people smiling, and there's a relaxation. And what's also important though is people that choose to wear masks. There's a lot of respect. In fact, I heard Dr. Bagley, Kristen Bagley at Western, her saying has been mask optional, but respect is required, and I love that, and because I was in a couple of elementary classrooms, and you have a couple of students wearing masks, and I've seen a couple of, staff people. And so I appreciate that, because that was a concern that a lot of people had. And so that's something that's been going very well. I also want to thank the school committee, and with all sincerity, and I think how we handled this, and your support of administration, working with nurses. And, I want to thank Mr. Pearson, because you were a big part of us coming up with those policies, because I really think we took it out of the political arena. And it doesn't mean that people still aren't politicians, but you supported us. And, I watch a lot of meetings. I talk to a lot of different people, and even the most challenging meetings we had were really not challenging. People shared their opinion, and I really appreciate the fact that even if people were trying to get people to say things, we just gave them honest answers. And I give a lot of credit to how you handled the situation, because you don't have to go far to look on YouTube and watch what goes on in school committee meetings. But I think how you supported us handling it, I truly appreciate, because we talk about that a lot, that it takes it out of that. It takes it out of that whole vote, because you still owned it, because you supported us. You voted for those policies. And so I truly appreciate it. I think it made our transition fairly smooth. I don't know if you've got a lot of pushback or feedback, and I didn't get in. Mr. Coward, he's the one that sends out the email. So even if people think they're sending it to me, they're sending it to him, right? And and we didn't get a lot, and so I wanted to thank you, because I think it really set the tone, and I appreciate it. It really helped us, I think, through this whole pandemic. We didn't have to worry about, even when there were emails to you, we responded, or I responded privately, or somebody say to me, hey, you're going to respond to this. And, sometimes I just had to gather my thoughts. So I really want to thank you for that. The other piece is that the playbook just came out. It's really reduced, that talks about quarantine, all those. It's really been revised. It puts a lot more ownership on the individuals, on the families. We have a meeting with our nurses next Monday or Tuesday.
There's a pod meeting tomorrow, a state level pod meeting that will go over the handbook and what's
But we're
inside it.
meeting-
And then we have the nurses
Yeah.
meeting on Monday after the pod meeting. And then we'll update our health and safety protocols that we've created based on that, which will be a slim version.
Right.
And then we'll send those out.
Right. So just, the process, we said that, and we mentioned that before, that we were going to do that. So that's coming up. And we're also going to be offering testing so if people if they do test, or they're sick, if we have students that are ill, and we're going to say to the parents, you can go do we encourage you to go get the PCR test and the rapid test. We're going to provide that in our district. Most likely, I'm meeting with Brianna Straczynski, our COVID nurse, tomorrow. She put together a plan, but we're going to try to make it convenient for parents that if they want to, they can just come to us. We'll do the testing. We'll get it to the lab. At least the rapid test, we can give them, right away. We can call them within 15 minutes. But the PCR test, we'll be able to get to the lab that day and help they should get their results much quicker. So we're going to offer that service, and that'll be in place probably sometime next week. So that's the update for COVID. And again, it's obviously eternal vigilance, but it's nice to have some normalcy. And I think our district, I think it's been a challenge, and we know it's not over, but I think we've done yeoman's work, and I think we've handled it as well as we could. So that's a COVID update. Performance audit update. So we know that we're going to have a brief brief. We're going to have a fairly high level overview of the findings by Mr. Pennington. We saw a draft. Ms. Patno is part of the steering committee. And what I will say is I think it's very positive for the schools. And one of the statistics that I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, because I know people are struggling. It's been a tough 2 years. People have, had it, and they were doing this. We hadn't pulled the mask mandate yet, right? But over 80% of our employees say this is a really good place to work, right? Which to me is important because, surveys are a way to really, if you want to get somebody, it's a good opportunity, right? But what they also said is over 80% said this is a really good place to have a career, right? So to me, that says a lot about the culture because we talk a lot about, I think we have a really good culture despite the challenges and despite our facilities and the budget issues we have. It wasn't that long ago, we laid off 383 teachers, right? So to me, that was very significant. And I think that they like I said, I think anything that we have an opportunity to review it. I created a Google Doc. We're going to give feedback because I think there's areas where, like an area they talked about the bond process, and I think they missed the mark. And so we're going to rebut that. They talked about lack of any institutional knowledge on both sides, and when it comes to finance, and I disagree because we have Sarah Mandrielli that's working, sometimes daily, right? With, you guys will reach out and ask a question. So there's areas where we'll push back, but I felt that it's very favorable. And when they talk about best practices at the very end, we hit the mark in almost everything, right? So there were no major, like part of it that they were hoping is, and I think they said, hopefully they're going to find something that we're not aware of. I don't think there's anything they came up with. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of what came up on the town. That's not my job, but and I'm going to reach out to Mr. Pennington tomorrow because I don't know if the expectation is, I'm going to make sure if we're supposed to share it, because I'd like you to have it before the meeting. So I'm going to reach out to him tomorrow. And if he's okay, I'll send it you it's a draft, but I think it would be important other than just looking at his slides, because I know some of the town's department heads have seen it. So if they have seen it, I don't know why we should be able to, right? So that, again, but I want to make sure I just want to be fair and talk to him. So I promise you I'll give that. So, but I was very, very pleased with it in terms of, especially how this process happened, right? We were supposed to do our own. We were, the process, you were part of it. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about, and I know Mr. Murphy's here, but we've had several meetings. Again, I want to thank Jay Longley and Jason Albuquerque. They both work. Jason's the COO for Envision Technology, and you guys have met Jason many times. He's presented. Great young man that was a graduate of Coventry High School and lives in town and helped us out immensely. But they brought to the table this EC Council is like the gold standard internationally for training around cybersecurity, maybe other training. We met with a couple of the individuals the other day. We're very close to working with them to offer this. We're looking at other ways to offer it to more students, but right now we feel we could offer it to maybe 50 students next year as part of our CTE program. But we're also exploring, because they have the largest contract, like the Department of Defense makes sure that everybody has these level training. We're going to offer what's called ethical hacker certificate. And it's an entry-level certificate that they're saying that people can go into the world of work and the companies right out of high school with this and make significant amount of money. They were thrown, I know it says there's over 4.5 million cybersecurity jobs they need 4.5 million employees worldwide. The United States has, I think he said, 450,000 openings in cybersecurity. And so the fact is, we talk about our welding program and allowing our students to get out year one, electric boat, $37,500, full benefits, college paid for if they want. Year two, they're making $50,000, right? So this is, they're looking at like, he was saying like $60,000 to $80,000 starting salaries. they can make six figures in a couple of years. And this is only the entry level training we're providing. There's other training levels. So we're going to offer that. If we can find ways to offer it to more students district wide, I mean, high school, but it's very rigorous. I would consider it like, passing this is like getting a 4 or 5 in an AP class. So not everybody is going to have the aptitude, but there's an awareness course that we're going to get for free. And there's small money. So we've talked about, Mr. Sands and I, a little bit about, we've already allocated a lot of funds to curriculum. This is high quality curriculum. So we'll look at that. We'll come back and, talk to you more about it. But if we can offer this, I think there's a cost of like maybe $75 per student. For the private sector to pay for this ethical hacker training, it's over $1,000, right, for an individual. But because we're in education, we get it for $75, and materials. The training, the professional development for our teachers is free because of our, the public sector. So a company that, that you guys work for, they would pay a lot of money for this. But I just think it's something that we're going to push. They're going to help us market it. We're going to, once we work out all the details, we received a bunch of documents the other day. I have to go through them tomorrow, but I'm just excited. We've talked about it. I know it's one component, but we will be the only school in Rhode Island that's doing this. So that's, I think, a feather in our cap. Again, it's through our networking, again, working with Envision. They're also going to help us look at, internships for students. So, and that's just one partnership. So I'm excited. They're willing to come to a meeting and talk to you about it, right? And the EC Council is willing to come because I think it's that important. I think it's important to come to the committee, have them explain to you just the ramifications of this for our students. But, I'm not even looking to draw students in. I just hope this helps us keep our students, our cybersecurity, our computer tech program is going to be second to none. And Jason Albuquerque is on the CTE board for the state. So he knows they're trying to go another route for cybersecurity. They're through URI, they're incorporating some different cybersecurity courses, but no certification. So we'll be much more advanced. So anyways, I'm excited about that. I think that's great for us. And again, doing this all through a pandemic, right? So that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Are there any school committee members that have any questions about that report? Mr. Florio, no? No, everybody's fine. Anything from the public? Seeing none. Again, thank you for that report. Next agenda item is citizens' comments. Are there any comments from the citizens gathered? Seeing no hands up.
Amy had her hand up there.
No, she's having a great time down,
One word, Miss Angelini, professionalism. I apologize.
Anyway, so I guess we can move to scheduling the next meeting. So is there a motion?
Next school committee meeting for March 24, 2022.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to adjournment, I have 8:19.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn at 8:19.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We are done. Thank you all for attending. I just want to,